everybody. Welcome to my panel. It's a bit of a rainy day, but I'm sure that'll clear up in just a bit. This is my panel. It's an introduction to Avatars 3.0. My name, myself, is Ekkosangen. You can call me Ekko. I've been playing VRChat since about late 2019. Early 2020. I've been tinkering with avatars for a little bit longer than that. I actually joined the Furality team with the first event. I'm one of their support specialists among a couple of other roles. And I really want to teach you a little bit about the concepts of Avatar 3.0 so that you can all go out and create some amazing stuff. So first off, this panel is primarily just going to be covering some of the basic concepts. This is solidly stuff that is in Unity. I'm not going to be talking about Blender, not going to be talking about animations. And it's all going to be about the ways you can make the stuff on the left do the stuff on the right. But if you're looking for a panel about the making of the actual content, I'm sorry. Maybe stick around in an event instance, and I'll be jumping around a bit afterwards, and might be able to point you towards some resources for that. I do put down Open Sound Control here. It's also known as OSC. But really, this is a panel entirely. It's way too much to cover in a panel all by it's all entirely its own thing. You can maybe catch the panel that's actually a little bit later about Spooter as an example of something that you can do with OSC. But understand that it's basically straight software development and can't quite teach that in an hour. If you do have any questions while this panel is happening, please head over to our Discord. There should be a channel set up called, I think it was Avatars 3 Q&A, and ask your questions in there. And I'll see about covering those a little bit later. So, the Unity Animator Controller. So this is the big topic here. And it's the main source of the logic of how your avatar decides on doing things that you want it to do. Or in some cases, how it decides to do the things you don't want it to do, because like all programming, it will do exactly what you tell it to do. And just like programming, it can get a little bit messy. There are tools for keeping it clean, but sometimes it does kind of have to be this way. But it's fine if you understand it. That's mainly what's going to matter. So what is an animator controller? The easiest way to describe that is it's just a bunch of flowcharts that tell animations to run. With each layer of the controller telling the avatar to animate in a particular way. This does mean that you have to be careful animating the same things on multiple layers, but don't let that stop you from, overdriving your blend shapes accidentally. It'll be fine. The basic gist is that you have layers, and each layer is a collection of states and transitions, and each of those layers can only be in a single state at a time, which activates a single animation. And with transitions facilitating the movement between those states like a logic gate. So starting at the very top, let's talk about those layers. These are what contain the logic of the controller. And you may not touch the settings of these a whole lot. They're a bit of an advanced topic, except for when you first create a layer, which is when you will immediately, without question, set the layer weight to 1. Do not forget to do this, because if you don't do it, nothing on that layer will work. People in the control room know what I'm talking about, and you will be very confused until someone points out that your layer has no weight. Because it won't be doing anything. You'll be like, why? But now that your layer weight is set to 1, let's put some stuff into those layers. And the first thing you'll be working on is states. And the best way to think about these is that they represent an animation. Whatever state the layer is currently in plays the animation within that state, as long as it's there. It doesn't have to have an animation in it, but they usually do. And that's the way that the animations are played. States also feature some very useful settings that you might want to play around with, like changing how quickly the animation plays, or if the animation plays mirrored. There's also some special stuff in there that VRChat provides called state behaviors, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But to get between your states, we want to use transitions. These are actually pretty fancy in that they will tween between the animations that you're moving in the states that you're moving between. So like, instead of going from angry to happy instantly, there's a sort of implied animation that's created between the two states, which you'll have quite a lot of control over. But in order for you to go through the right transitions at the right time, you'll need to set up at least one condition. Otherwise, the active state will just move around over and over, and people will think you're a cryptid. Not one of the cool cryptids either, unfortunately. The conditions are the way to test and go through those transitions. So if a condition is true, then do such and such animation. Is my hat parameter true? Then show my hat. Is my gesture value less than 5? Then don't change my expression. This forms the base of all of the decision making that your avatar goes through. Even on an avatar that doesn't use any custom animator controllers, even just the default animations are all controlled by making decisions based on what VRChat knows you're doing, what your VRChat client knows you're doing, like moving or using a hand gesture. And all of that is possible because we have parameters. This is the last basic thing to talk about. They're just variable values that your transitions can read through its conditions, and your action menu can change through its controls. There are 3 types of them. The Boolean or Boolean if you actually are a cryptid. Then the basic numbers, which are integers. And then you have the deluxe numbers, which are floats, short for floating point numbers or just a decimal number. You can think of these parameters just as the data that goes in, and then everything else gets the animations out based on those parameters. And if you ping me in the panel's Discord channel right now, I will give you a ton of free parameters just for free, just for being a fan. Ping me in that channel right now. Maybe no, the community team, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Also, I mean, you get these parameters for free anyway because they're actually VRChat's built-in parameters, which they have helpfully listed in the VRChat docs. Also, read the docs. Please read the docs. They're super handy. I usually end up bringing them up like every time I every time I'm working on my avatar, just because there's so much good information in there. Some of the most useful examples of these built-in parameters are your left and right hand gesture value, your actual velocity when you're moving around, how upright you are, or in the case of a late Saturday night in Club Fin, how upright you aren't, your active vising when you're talking, if you're AFK, if you're muted. Honestly, just literally just go read the docs. This is just a small snippet of what's on the docs. They're literally your best friend. Lots and lots of useful reference information there that you'll probably want to know at some point. But besides the parameters that VRChat gives us, we can also make our own parameters. VRChat lets you sync up to 256 bits of parameters across the network, which means that everyone in the world will sync up with your parameter values. And that means you can have up to 256 booleans, or up to 32 integers or floats, which is actually quite a bit. And outside of doing like face tracking, you're probably not likely to fill this space. But feel free to prove me wrong, right? That's it for, the most basic of concepts of working with avatars. And just what I've covered can be used in such an incredible number of creative ways. It's absolutely the greater than the sum of its parts. If you ask me how to do something, there's a pretty good chance I might be able to find a way to do it with just this stuff. The only thing that you'll need to learn beyond this is making simple animations or visual effects to put into your controllers, and a little bit of the action menu, which is mostly self-explanatory, but again, of course, the docs cover what each thing does and how to use it in such a great way that I'm just going to say, go look at the docs again. Like it's so handy. But then along came Avatar Dynamics. Another really big update to avatars that has made things even crazier, because people are still just scratching the surface of what you can do with this sort of thing. I've already seen some crazy stuff being avatars, and it's absolutely wild. There's still so much more to think about with it. There's really only two things that make up Avatar Dynamics 2. The first being PhysBones. So most people just call them PhysBones. They replaced the older system of dynamic bone movement called, Dynamic Bones. And quick shout out to Will Hong. He's the person who made it. Sorry that your Unity store income has gone absolutely down, but PhysBones are just so significantly more optimized that I think you can have around 5 to 10 times more of them compared to dynamic bones, which is why I believe that they are being phased out. If you didn't know that, then surprise. I'm pretty sure VRChat said that they would somewhere. PhysBones are just straight out better anyway. Just use PhysBones. They're not that bad. They do look intimidating to work with. There's a great graphic out there, if you ask me about it, that can help you kind of understand what all of the forces do. But in reality, it is a little bit complex. Again, read the docs. The docs will have all of that reference information there. The docs will never let you down, I guarantee it. But besides just making your avatar more organic, you get to interact with PhysBones, other people even. You can set them up to be grabbed, stretched, posed. They even create their own parameters that you can read, and the component has a little bit more information on how to use these. But the big thing is that you don't even need to add these to your custom parameters. They're actually synced just by virtue of everybody is always processing that sort of thing, just on their own machine. So you don't need to sync that across the network, right? This is also true of the other part of the avatar dynamics, which is contacts. And these interact in pairs. You have a sender and a receiver to produce more input for your controllers. And what a contact is just this invisible ball or capsule that either emits a signal or it receives a signal. Obviously, the first thing I had to do was make a head pat detector. So feel free to give me some head pats. But you'll also want to ask me for a high five if you see me. I have a fun little high five there. But because it's pretty safe to assume that we mostly all have hands and heads and feet, VRChat actually makes each of those bones into a contact sender by default. So you don't need to send up a contact sender on your hand to be able to head pat people or give them a high five. You just need to set up a receiver that looks for the hand signal. There's even a proximity sensor setting for contacts that lets you tell how close the closest signal is to the center of that contact. And there's just a few more things I wanted to cover before I close out. I do have a few more advanced things I want to tease you on, just because enticing you to learn more is probably the best way to get you to actually want to learn. I can't force you to learn, of course, but maybe I can at least pique your interest, maybe. I didn't mention it before, but your avatar actually has five of these animator controllers. I don't mention it because you'll probably only be working with just the one of them, and that is the effects layer, which is all the way on top of the stack. The effects layer should only have animations in it that don't affect transform animations, like moving bones around. Theoretically, this isn't enforced. I'm absolutely breaking this rule myself right now, but theoretically speaking, the rest in descending order are the action layer, which is for animations that take full control of your avatar. So, emotes, dancing, anything like that. Then you have the gesture layer for gesture-based transform animations. Not your facial expressions if they use blend shapes to make the facial expression, which most avatars do this. The only reason why is because they won't actually show up in the mirror if you do put them there. Theoretically, they will actually still work, just it won't be reflected in mirrors. It's also for idle. The gesture layer is also for idle animations that use non-human body parts. So like a tail, big ears, that sort of thing. Instead, for human-based body parts idle animations, you'd want to use the additive layer. And then the last layer right at the bottom is the locomotion layer, which is for animations related to movement, so walking around, running. Definitely check out the default layer for this. It's actually kind of interesting to see how movement works in VRChat and how it animates that movement. The other advanced thing, of course, you can't talk about avatar stuff without talking about OSC. Like I said before, I wanted to mention this because it lets you do literally anything even harder than before, because it's external software controlling your VRChat avatar. The big use for this, of course, is bridging the gap between face trackers or other VR equipment and VRChat. I don't believe you need to do. Actually, no, you do still need to do eye tracking as well, but face tracking, eye tracking, getting those bridged to VRChat. But there's way too much you can do with it to list off here. I can't touch on this because it's an entire panel of its own. It's honestly more than that because, like I said, it's straight software development. There's actually a panel, like I said, there's a panel on Spooter, which is an implementation on OSC for Twitch integration with your for you streamers out there. And that comes up in just a couple of hours. There's also state behaviors, which can do some pretty cool stuff as well. If you want to include some, randomization in your avatars, or you want to have an avatar parameter that actually gives you a random number that you can then sync up across the network. The avatar parameter driver is what you're looking for. And that would just go on a state and activate as soon as you enter that state. Animator tracking control might be another one you'll find useful if you are animating like your eyes for any reason. Or if you want to, you'll see this used mostly in the action layer to take tracking away from your avatar to do an animation that uses, all the entire body. Another thing to look, this is just another thing that you can look at the docs for. There's a couple of other ones that are very useful. Again, give me a high five sometime, or 10 high fives, and you'll see. But the last thing I'm going to talk about that might be slightly controversial, but just use right defaults when you're starting out and you're just making, some simple facial expressions. I guarantee you there's people out there right now saying I'm dumb for saying this, and they're right. And VRChat doesn't recommend it, but that's because they're professionals. I tried not using it early on, and wasn't a mistake because I did learn a lot, but I did have a bit of a bad time because I was just starting out and was like, why is my stuff not animating properly? Why is it stuck like this? The explanation as to why you would or wouldn't want to use it is a lot more technical. So just use it. Well, if all you want to do is set up some facial expressions and you don't mind a little bit of wonkiness, it's not going to be that bad. And then discover what it does and figure out how to work without it. But I believe that is it. I do have a fair bit of extra time. So if there's any questions, let me actually bring up the channel here, and I'll see if I can answer some of your questions here. Where is that channel? I swear it's in here. I found it. Okay. Let me bring that a little bit more up front here. All right. First question I see from Christoph: can the PowerPoint be shared? 100%. I will post the PowerPoint in the channel as soon as I get a moment. So I'm a little bit busy, but I'll find the time to get the PowerPoint shared in the channel. This will also be put up as a VOD on our YouTube channel eventually. There's also a number of iterations of this exact panel from other conventions that are already up there. Definitely check those out. It covers pretty much the same information. So let's take a look and see. Oh my god, a lot of you pinged me about parameters. Okay. Don't worry, I'll give you those parameters for absolutely free. Absolutely free. Let's see. Never mind, somebody has already linked it. E Phantom, thank you so much. check out that page for your absolutely free parameters. So we have Baron Jama, the Articuno, asking, is coding needed for dynamics or parameters? If so, what's the best coding language? While it is kind of a form of programming, animator controllers aren't any specific language. It is its own thing that Unity uses. They can just jump into an animator, like create a new animator controller in Unity, and then jump into the animator tab that you might have to pull out just from the top in the windows. I know there's a key combination for it. I'll see if I can find it, but you don't need to know any coding to do any avatar dynamics or any sort of avatar work. It's all just built into Unity. But I do recommend, if you do have coding experience, you'll probably find it fairly straightforward. What happens if your Unity crashes during mid-parameters making? Do you need to do it all over again, or will it automatically keep where you had it? Luckily, I believe, since it's not linked to the scene, this does end up saving each time you make changes. So if your Unity crashes, it doesn't, you will probably not lose any progress on your controllers, which is a good thing. And Mr. Swan's had another question. How hard would it be to learn for a person who has no Unity experience to learn parameters? And what advice do you have for beginners? So I think it's fairly straightforward, honestly, but that's the software development background of mine talking. All it really is if you like understand like how to write an if statement in a programming language, that's just what a transition is. You take the parameters, which are your variables, and plug them into a transition, which is your if statement. And then the then part of the if statement is the next state that you're going to. It is all relatively straightforward. I believe anybody can do some simple stuff with avatars. So definitely give it a try. Look up some tutorials. There's somebody on YouTube that I recommend by the name of Sipbox with 2 P's. They have fantastic, like very, very fast-paced tutorials, so don't be afraid to pause them as you follow along. But it just goes over some like how to do some basic stuff, and anybody can really do it. Will slide be posted after the panel ends? Yes, I can confirm that. Dumb question, what's right defaults? I don't think I'm qualified to answer this question, but right defaults basically grabs like a snapshot of what I believe how it works is it grabs a snapshot of like where things are before you animate them, and then sends them back to that position after you're done animating them. It does seem to be a little bit finicky sometimes with lens shapes. I know when I used to use lens shapes that used right defaults, they wouldn't animate entirely back to default after I was done with them, which caused, it's a little bit of wonkiness, but that's kind of the basic gist of what right defaults even is. It's not very well explained, I'm sorry, but that's my basic anecdotal understanding of it. We have, and that was, thank you, Amber Lambda, for that question. Red Iron asks, Avatars 3.0 has an insane amount of potential, but are there any hard limits on things you can't or should not do? I'm not going to say there's hard limits, but you do want to try and optimize your animator controllers as much as possible, because they do have a performance impact. It isn't super large, but you do need to be aware that if you're doing a lot of things, it may have an impact on performance for other people and yourself. But hard limits, I think, is just the hard limit of like how many parameters you can sync across the network. Again, 256 bits, which is surprisingly a lot. Like I don't know anybody who has 200 toggles on their avatar because that would make their avatar way too big. But if you do find any sort of hard limit, please let me know. That would be interesting if you run up on that at all. Let's see what else we have. What's the difference between an int and a float, and what would you use those for? That's a great question. An integer and a float are kind of the same thing in that they are both a number. Integers can only be whole numbers, though. So 1 through, I think, 256, 255, rather. And then floats range from negative 1.0 to positive 1.0. You would use an integer for anything that doesn't need like that amount of precision to it, where the gesture, your left and right hand gestures use an integer to tell your avatar which hand gesture you're making. Victory, finger gun, rock and roll, and that's just a single number that it passes on to your avatar. A float is something that you would use in situations where you want kind of a precision to it, where you actually have a parameter from VRChat called left gesture weight and right gesture weight, which actually uses the trigger on your controllers to tell VRChat how much the controller or the trigger is pressed on your controller. That's actually a very handy thing to do if you want to like animate something very step-by-step kind of thing. Some of the action menu controls do use floats to control the spinny, I think the spinny wheel one that uses the float, as well as the actual like for two-directional controller. Uses two floats to tell how much your stick is tilted. So anything that needs a little more precision to it, you'd probably use a float for. Let's see what other questions we have. Toggles. Soups asks, toggles, how does one do? So toggles are basically two states and two transitions. That's pretty much all there is to it. I'll see if I can explain it a little bit more with like a picture. Sorry, I'm a bird. But the basic gist is you have two states, one that's on, one that's off, and then it would have a Boolean parameter that would determine which state it's in. So you'd have the transition that goes between them, so that like when it's on, it goes into the on state, and when it's off, it goes into the off state. That's probably one of the first things that I even did with Avatars 3.0 when it first came out was, how do I set up something to toggle something on and toggle it off when I'm done with it? And it worked really, really well. It's so simple. Like, that's definitely one of the first things you should definitely try is like try and just turn your badge on and off, because how you do that's also going to set you up with how to make like simple animations. Again, Sipbox on YouTube, SIPPBOX on YouTube has many tutorials that just use the toggling technique. So give that a try. Tell me how it goes. The avatar help channel is there if you have any trouble with that. Let's see. Is the chair sitting animation on the locomotion layer? I'm looking to fix it on an avatar that clips horribly in chairs. I believe so, actually. Actually, no. No, that's actually in the action layer. That is in the action layer. It'll be, I believe, in like the bottom half of it, where that controls all of the various setting stuff, at least by default. Thoughts on using VRC Fury instead of the usual / manual process, especially for someone starting out? Yes, absolutely. I'm just here to teach like the basic concepts so that you theoretically don't have to use VRC Fury or like want to understand what VRC Fury is doing. I haven't used VRC Fury very much myself, so I can't speak about like what all it does. But I've heard so many good things about VRC Fury. I know what it's like looking to accomplish. Definitely check out VRC Fury. It's absolutely fantastic. We have, if I need this, here's a good question. If I need to set weight to 1, why doesn't Unity set that for me? Don't mind it. I don't know, man. I'm just a bird. There's probably a reason for it, but I wish I knew. I really like it to just set to 1 by default. Maybe it does in a later version. Maybe we'll get to that version eventually, but for now, it doesn't hurt to even just double check it if it ever does start weighted to 1. But I don't know why it doesn't set to 1 at first. I'm sorry. We have Rain Wolf. Thank you so much for posting one of the videos from Sitbox. They're fantastic. Check out their channel. They have all sorts of things. We have a great question from Tech. What is this for? And it's a picture that shows the animator component on an avatar, pointing to the controller slot for that, which is set to none. It should always be set to none because VRChat uses all the controllers that you provide to it in the avatar descriptor to make its own controller that combines all of your controllers into one. You do want to leave that empty because that is basically what VRChat fills in. It doesn't do anything if you leave something in there, but you'll probably want to be a great way to make animations actually is to put the controller into that slot in the animator component on a duplicate. Pro tip, make sure that's on a duplicate because you can cause it to be, it can be a little bit buggy sometimes. Watch out for that. But just leave that empty. It's fine. VRChat fills that in for you. It's no big deal. Is there any way to transfer or use bone constraints from Blender in Unity? Is there something similar? I don't know. That's a little bit outside of the scope of what I'm looking to cover here. Sorry, Insane Dragon. I try and not touch Blender as much as possible. I know there are some constraints that you can use. They do have a performance impact, of course. So they are accounted for in, performance metrics for like what rating you get. So I do know they exist, but I'm not able to really. I have no idea on how to do that. I'm sorry. Let's see. Ooh, this is a great question from Don Silveray. What would you say is the biggest hurdle you face routinely? For example, 3D modelers dread UV unwrapping, but it must be done, of course. What is your frequent hurdle in avatar creation? As far as avatar animator controllers go, the tedium of setting up your animations, making sure that they all work correctly, making sure your logic works correctly. There isn't any one thing about it that is like the biggest hurdle, other than making sure that the transitions all work correctly, making sure that your animations are properly set up, all of that sort of thing. It can get a little bit tedious. I'm not gonna lie, but it's the troubleshooting part of it is usually the biggest part of getting my controllers to work correctly. So let's see. Another question here. How to make a toggle work. I did cover this a little bit earlier, so check the VOD. I'll see if I can also answer your question in the channel. Take a look. Yeah, I can probably take one more. Let's see. Again, Rainwolf, thank you so much for linking to Sitbox for toggles. Yeah, there it is. If you're wondering how to use toggles, Rainwolf, thank you so much for posting the toggling props and accessories video from Sitbox. It's very quick. They're not slow, but that's why it's a video. You can just pause it in spots. You can follow along at your own pace. Do we have any other questions? Yes, thank you for noticing that I'm just being a bird. Ooh, do we have any more? A couple of a little bit more technical ones that I might see about answering a little bit later tonight when I get out of VR, I think. But I think I've covered just about any questions that are left. So, oh, here we go. What advice do you give to standalone Quest users who have no access to a PC capable of running VRC, who want to include as much as they can while held within Quest constraints? That is a good question, because if your PC can't handle VRChat, it may still be able to handle Unity, which means that you can get, you can work on avatars to some extent. It might be a little bit slower just because if you can't run VRChat, Unity at its base is not too far behind. But you should be able to use it to do everything that I've said here, because it's not too bad. It's you'll just have to be uploading in order to test a lot of the logic that you're working with, or testing it inside of Unity itself. But I think that's good. I think I covered just about everybody's questions. If I didn't answer your question, please ask it again. I'll see about answering more questions when I get out of VR. I do want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you so much. That's my time coming up. So thank you for watching. Thank you for attending Furality Sylva. It's become a wonderful sunny day out here now. The rain is gone. Go enjoy the rest of the event. Check out Club Finn. Club Finn is so cool. I need everybody to appease the great and mighty Aviosaur of the dance floor. Check me out on Twitter. Check me out on Discord. Send me amazing things that you do with your avatars. I live to see all the things that people do. It's so cool. I'm going to jump around to a couple of the instances, but for now, have a great Furality Sylva.